chapter 11, verse 1. And this is where Jesus gives what we might call a model prayer or a sample prayer, or actually he answers. This happens very much in the Gospels. The disciples will ask a question, and Jesus gives a response that's answering a question or something that's brought up by one of the disciples. And here it says in Luke's Gospel, chapter 11, verse 1, it came to pass as he was praying, that's Jesus, he was praying in a certain place. When he ceased, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. So evidently John the Baptist had taught his disciples something about prayer or something about how to pray. We don't have any record of that. We don't know what John the Baptist taught, but evidently Jesus' disciples were aware of that. And after having heard and observed Jesus at prayer, evidently something about that motivated them to say, teach us to pray. And I suppose what they're thinking is that they saw something in Jesus' relationship with the Father that they wanted also to participate in. So they ask a good question, I think, good honest question, teach us to pray. Now what Jesus gives us is a very familiar passage, the Lord's Prayer, which sometimes we just recite it and say it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way I want to look at it this morning is, in answer to this question, when the disciples said, teach us to pray, I want to look at it as though it is teaching something and explaining something to us. In other words, not just what the words are, but why is he using the words that he's using? What is he conveying by using the words that he says? And I'll just read it out of Luke's Gospel, first of all, though it, of course, it is very familiar. Then I'd like to talk about it in a little bit more detail. Verse 2 says, He said to them, When you pray, say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so in earth. Give us day by day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Now this is the Lord's Prayer as presented to us in Luke's Gospel. I think the wording is a little different when you read it in the other Gospels, but this is the one I'd like to look at today. Now back to verse 2 again. I'd just like to take these thoughts and look at it, at what is being taught to us. Because they said, teach us to pray. With the idea in mind that though there's nothing wrong with reciting it, what is he conveying to us as teaching? Or we could say, what's the theology of the Lord's Prayer? Now, I almost hate to use the word theology because we're kind of prejudiced against that word. We hate to. But really, theology is not a bad word. All it means is it's a compound where theos means God and ology means logos. It just means the way we think about God. And I think it's important to have a deliberate way of thinking about God rather than just a haphazard, accidental way. You know, everybody thinks about God. Did you know that? Everybody has a thought about God. Even atheists, their thought is there isn't one. But that's a thought about God. That's a theology. So what kind of thinking about God is conveyed in this prayer? First of all, he says, when you pray, say, Our Father. Okay, that's good. Now, apart from just the words, why does he say that? Well, he wants us to regard the God that we're praying to as a father, to regard him that way, especially as we pray. And I think that makes all the difference in the world, to regard him not as just a sort of a faraway, halfway indifferent, some kind of abstract figure far away in the heavens, but see, Father to me conveys an idea of intimacy, doesn't it to you? A father to me conveys the idea of someone who has given birth to you and who feels connected and obligated to you. You know, a father is not just, in fact, he's not at all indifferent to his children. He feels an obligation to care for them. Isn't that right? I mean, that's part of being a father. You are obligated to care for those that are your children. So Jesus says, when you pray, think of him and consider him to be your father. I'd like to look at a couple of verses that also talk about this, since we're talking about what's being taught here. One I like is in Psalm 103. You don't have to, I think Phil can get it for us if we don't want to turn there. Phil, would you find Psalm 103, verse 13? Now I'm going to test Phil on his ability to operate the software. Oh, great. Good job, Phil. Now, in the 103rd Psalm, he is also... the psalmist David here is likening God to a father. And he says, listen to what he says here. Like as a father pities his children. And by the way, what does pity mean? It means sympathy. He has sympathy. He sympathizes. See, I think sometimes we think of God as so austere and so removed, we forget the fact that He does understand how we feel. And that's what this verse is conveying. He pities, or He sympathizes with His children. Well, just like that, so the Lord pities or sympathizes with them that fear Him. Now, fear Him doesn't mean afraid. It means that have respect and reverence. That's the best way to say that. Just like a father sympathizes with his children, the Lord has sympathy for those that reverence Him. Next verse. This is interesting and enlightening here. Forgive me, verse 14. Yeah. Here's what. For He knoweth our frame. He remembers that we are dust. Now, that's very poetic language. Very beautiful language. But what is it really saying? Well, just to say it in everyday vernacular, He knows perfectly well what we're made of. He knows perfectly well what kind of weak stuff we're made of. Now, we like to think we, see ourselves, especially men, like to see ourselves as strong. And who was I talking to the other day? Something about, who was it? Somebody was telling me how they found a way that they could get direct. Oh, it was a teacher at the college, Dr. Petrie. She was showing me she had an iPhone. You know what an iPhone is? You can connect to the internet anywhere with it. It's a little too fancy for me. I've just got one of those old. My cell phone doesn't even take pictures. That's how old my cell phone is. But she had this iPhone, and she was saying, look how great this is. It's got it even knows where you are when you're traveling. She showed me you can punch a few buttons and you can get directions for where you're going to go. And that could be very helpful. I said, yeah, unless you're a man, you'd never use it because you don't want to ask for directions. But you see, though we like to think of ourselves as strong and capable and we have it all together, really the truth of it is the Lord knows what weak stuff we really are made of. What that means is how much we depend upon Him, how much we really do depend upon Him. And we're none of us as independent and strong as we would like to think. We really do depend on the Lord. But it says here, He knows our frame. He remembers that we're dust. That's just a way of saying He knows what we were made out of in the beginning, and that He knows what we are. You see, He has sympathy for us. Now that's why Jesus says in this Lord's Prayer, when you pray, think of God that way. You're praying to someone who already sympathizes with you, who already has an intimate care about your lives. Now here's another one. If you'll give me Matthew chapter 7, verse 7. Back to Jesus again. Jesus also likens God to a father. Again, when He says pray, say our Father, He has these ideas in mind. Here He says, again talking about prayer, ask. Now listen to this. Please listen to what it's saying. Ask, and it shall be given you. Notice He didn't even say, ask and there's a 50-50 chance. Notice how, He could have said that. Notice how direct and certain He is about it. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Go ahead, next one, Phil. For everyone that asks receives, and he that seeks finds. And to him that knocks it shall be opened. Okay, give me another one. Or what man is there of you, whom if his son ask bread, will he give him a stone? Again, he's explaining to you how the Father's attitude to us, and he likens it to an earthly father. And he says, now what kind of a man is there if the son asks for bread, will he give him a stone? Why does he say that? Well, he said, you're just, if your son comes to you and said, Daddy, give me a piece of bread, you're not going to trick him and give him a stone. Here, eat this. Why don't you chew on this for a while? You're going to, of course, why? Because you sympathize. You care about your children. He says, think of God the same way. Okay, another one. Verse 10. Or if he asks a fish, will he give him a serpent? Not only will he not give him a stone instead of a piece of bread, he's not going to give you something dangerous or something that's going to kill you. See, God doesn't deal, and I don't mind saying that, He does not deal in dangerous things. He does not deal in deadly things. There's already those things here. We don't need to be getting those things from heaven. And He doesn't have any of that. See, we have to ask ourselves, why is Jesus saying these words? He is trying to convey to us what the Father is really like. Because Jesus even said this. He says, nobody knows the Father except the Son, and to whomsoever the Son will reveal Him. That's what He's doing here. He's revealing to us the nature of what the Father is really. If you ask for a fish, He's not going to trick you and give you something bad. Okay, verse 11. If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children. See, if we just, remember, He said He knows our frame. He remembers that we're dust. If we're just common, if common, ordinary people, in other words, less than God, if we know at least how to give good things to our children, and don't we know that as parents? Sure we do. We know how to give good things to our children. If you know how, Then he says, how much more? Again, not how much less. And not even on a different way. He just says, in the same way, but more. Get that? In the same way, but more. See, sometimes I've talked to people who say, well, God's got a different idea of what's good for us than we do. No, He doesn't. Jesus said He's got the same one we do, except more. Get that? How much more shall your Father which is in heaven give good things to them that ask Him? Not bad things, but good things. Now, why is Jesus saying these things? He wants to implant in our minds the idea that God is out for our good, that He does love us, that He sympathizes with us, that He cares for us the same way a father cares for his children. He wants us to have that idea in mind when we come to pray.